Alright, let's see if we can try this again. Because I keep having so many problems with this recording phone sound quality. Now, before I started talking about the coming kingdom. Okay, well, what's happening? Why is there so much confusion going on right now? So much where people really don't have any idea, what they're dealing with or what they're supposed to do. Well, that's because we've been in an age called grace. And we know it as the age of grace, but many people also don't know it is also called the age of mystery. So there are a lot of mysteries that happened in order for the age of grace to be possible. Now, why is it called the age of grace? Because it followed the age that came before it, which was the age of the Mosaic Law. In the age of the Mosaic Law, everyone was under the curse of the law. Now the laws have 613 actual laws of the Bible, and they all flow out of the Ten Commandments. And see, once you broke a law, it was like your sin could be covered, but it couldn't be washed away. So that was why they had to do all the different sacrifices, the washings, the drinking, all the ordinances, the diverse, sacrifice all the animals. Animals had to be specifically clean animals, because it was the sacrificed blood of the animal that was paying the price for sin in their place. So the animals were like the scapegoats. And you had the priests that had to do this constantly. And it wasn't like anybody could just do this. Only the priest that the God specifically chose to do it could do it. That was the issue that King Saul had when he decided to do his own sacrifice. He violated that law because his prophet, who was the prophet Samuel, he was supposed to do all of the priestly duties. King Saul wasn't supposed to be nowhere near sacrificing any animals, so when he violated that. Now you know that the Lord was very serious about that. Even when he mentioned that nobody was to touch that ark. And what happened? The ark got the rock and it fall in one pit. And the man put forth his hand to keep it from falling, and he touched the ark and he died instantly. So see, they had all of these laws that they had to keep. You see, nobody, in order to be made perfect with God, you had to keep every law perfectly from birth. You have to have never sinned, because God is holy and sinless. So in order to be right with God, you had to be holy and sinless. You had to live a life without sin. And that was impossible. For in the Second Testament, it's revealed to us that everybody sinned and fell short of the glory of God. So this was why there had to be an official sin bearer, or an official sacrifice for everybody. So when he did that, Yeshua became the Lamb of God. He became that lamb that they used to sacrifice in the age of the Mosaic Law. So when he became the last sacrifice, he became the sacrificial lamb. He took all of the curses onto himself, and he paid the price of death with his death. And that's why you have all of these people that are able to do a lot of things, and they're not commanded to sacrifice him. Because he died in our place and he gave us grace. And that is the age of grace. Now what's happening now is that now the age of grace is coming to an end and we're coming into a new age. And this new age is called the age of, oh no, don't get out in the middle of the street. No, you don't want to get out, you're in the middle of the street. This newer age is called the age of the kingdom. Now, why would they call this the age of the kingdom when you had all kinds of kingdoms being ran by man? That's because man has been, this is what Yeshua said, in the words I read. He said, the nations exercise authority and rule over them, but it will not be that way with you. If you want to be a chief, you have to be a minister. If you want to be a ruler, you got to become a servant. Because the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, to be a servant, and to give himself a ransom for them. So what he's saying is that the least becomes the first becomes the least. It's a kingdom, it's upside down, and it's backwards to what man's kingdom. This here is things that are impossible to man, but it's only possible with the Lord. Because the kingdoms of the world, when you have a king, everyone is expected to die in service for the king, especially if they are serving the military. But see, Yeshua was the only king who died for his people. And then he said, I have the power to lay down my life for the sheep, and I have the power to take it back up. So when we're talking about the kingdom of Yeshua, we're talking about a different kind of kingdom. This is not just another earthly kingdom. This is a spiritual kingdom. That is a spiritual throne, and can't nobody sit in it but the chosen one. Yeshua himself. Spiritual kingdom, spiritual throne. And that's why I was saying before, anybody that goes about building a kingdom, trying to build a throne for himself, it can't be. Because there aren't but two thrones in the spiritual kingdom. There aren't but two. One is the kingdom of light, and one is the kingdom of darkness. Not the kingdom of darkness. The kingdom of darkness, that is the absence of light, and light represents knowledge. So we're talking about the kingdom of ignorance. In the kingdom of ignorance, you have agents, spiritual agents, whose assignment it is to ensure that people remain ignorant. Because the kingdom of darkness can't come on people who are well informed about the devices and the thoughts of how the wicked adversaries work. So that was one of the reasons why we were spreading this information about how the adversary operates. But the adversary blinded a lot of minds and fooled a lot of people. You see, he has to operate in deception. For him to have any type of opportunity, he's got to operate in deception. So that means that he will have duped a lot of people because he don't want them to know the spirit laws. And so you got a whole lot of spirit laws there. And one of those spiritual laws says that, when it comes to that kingdom, it says that he who leadeth into captivity, he must also go into captivity. He who killeth with the sword, that's the Bible and the civil power, he must also be killed with the sword, the Bible and the civil power. Now, if he who kills with the sword, that is following this captivity spiritual announcement. So if people are using the Bible in an attempt to lead people into captivity and kill it with the sword, those who don't want or those who don't go along with it, that it's saying that whoever does this, you know, this judgment comes on them. Now this is Matthew 7, chapter 7, verse 1 and 2, where it says, the measure that you use to judge, the very same measure will be used to judge you. So how do you know if you're operating in the dark captivity or in the dark kingdom darkness? Because the two kingdoms have principles, tenets. One of the principles, or two of the principles of the kingdom of light is freedom and abundance. And two of the principles of the kingdom of darkness is slavery and lack. So if the work that you do to build a kingdom involves putting people in lack, keeping people in lack, and leading them into captivity, you are serving the dark one, serving the dark kingdom. And it follows the same principle of the Israelites who were in captivity in Egypt, in the Egyptian slavery, where they were given the bricks that they needed in order to build the surfaces that would be used to enslave them. That's a spiritual principle. Now these spiritual laws, we cannot change them, because see, the difference between the true creator and anyone who wants to be a creator simulator is that the true creator's laws are living, and they are going to be working. His laws are his automation. They're going to work whether you believe them or not. There's laws built into everything. There's laws built into the trees. There's laws that govern the function. This is why no two planets have ever collided. Or even the places where they have two moons, they never collide. You see that stuff in movies that simulated reality. But in reality, they never collide. This planet just happened to be just the perfect place out. It's a place of creation for humans. The planet gets just warm enough. It's not so warm that humans can't go outside during the daytime, except maybe in certain places, and it's not like that all the time. So this is a planet that's made for humans, the air we breathe. Even the very elements that are in the planet are also in our bodies. And that follows where he says that man was made out of the humus, out of the afar, the dust of the ground. So when we're doing anything that goes against what the Creator did, since he sent someone to die on the cross to take our place, that means he is bearing the cost of our sin, which is death. So when you attack him, you're only attacking yourself, because he died for you, and you can't beat someone who loses for you. I think I was mentioning earlier, I said, okay, what's the problem? He died for you. He's taken your death onto himself so that you could have grace. So that we are, does somebody want their death back? Man, because he paid all the price. The only way we're able to do anything is by the grace that he gave us. So we have him to thank for everything, everything to be thankful for. Everything that is in existence were created by the raw materials that he put here on the earth. Even the mixture of synthetic materials or anything. That's why he says everything on the earth belongs to him.
Stop requested. Please exit from the rear door.
So when we work to build a kingdom of darkness, then we're only working to use the tools that we're given to build the surfaces that would be used to enslave those who built that kingdom. because this here is a form of what's known as colonization. Now, colonization was taught by Dr. Myron Golden. And I think I remember pretty well what he taught. He said, because I've been recommending people to check out his videos for a long time. And what he said about colonization, he said this. He said, empires, actually what he actually said was evil empires, always went and conquered other nations. And then they would take ownership of the lands and the people. And then they would use that to expand their culture. This is what colonization is. And see, the kingdom of light is not spread by colonization, it's spread by demonstration. Because the Lord wants to make you a king, not over people, but over your assignment. And then you use your assignment to serve the people you come across, to minister to them, to help them, to serve them. Now, people don't think that serving people has something to do with serving the Lord and the church. But if you are a public servant, you have an assignment to serve the public. Remember, it used to say on the police cars, proud to protect and serve. I know many people, they have this feeling about, authority or something like that. But, even if you work in the water department, sewage department, light department, you're a public servant and you're supposed to serve the people you come across. If you work as a bank, you're a bank teller, you're a public servant. See, everybody, they try to take the gospel and try to lock it up in this church and leave it just there. But Yeshua didn't say, I am the truth, the way, and the church. He said, I'm the truth, the way, and the life. And all we got to do is look around us to see how a lot of us have been deceived about a lot of things, such as everything that we look at. Matter of fact, everything you see in this background here, even this phone, this camera I'm using, this earpiece, this shirt, this, you see all these materials. These were all made from materials that someone made, manufactured, distributed, because somebody bought something and somebody sold something. That's the only way any nation can function. So if money and wealth or business is not a God idea, then you have a problem. Because then that would mean he only put the people here while wealth was created by somebody else. And how could he make you into a king if you don't know nothing about, if you have no wealth? Because he said, the Bible even tells us, money answers all things. You can't function without it. It's not that the Lord doesn't want you to have money. He just don't want money to have you. He said, you're not supposed to be slave to the money. You're supposed to be the master of your finances. And you are a slave to his purpose. You submit yourself to that. You submit yourself as a slave to your gift. The gift that you spend a lot of time with, nurturing, cultivating, so that you can use it to go serve people and help them. Because there are a lot of people with gifts inside of them, but they are dormant. So when we work to keep these people asleep and to keep them in captivity so that we can rule over them, you're operating in kingdom darkness, which cannot last. Which also, the person who judges to build a kingdom also has to be judged. Based on everything you do and every measure you meet, it shall be used upon you. This is a spiritual law. That's what's explained about spiritual laws. They're God's automation. And since God created science, and it took man thousands of years to begin to see some of the scientific laws after so many thousands of years of observation, they were able to come up with scientific hypotheses. And a lot of them turned out to be true, and they explain God's automation. One of the main automations is the law of polarity. And the law of polarity says that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That means basically everything has two sides. So that's why there's no one-sided coin, there's no one-sided slice of bread, there's no one-sided door. Even this hat I got on, you got an underside and an overside. Two sides to everything, two sides to a mirror. Said if there's anything in existence that only has one side, it cannot exist. Not in physical human existence. It cannot exist. And this not only counts as physical laws of polarity, it's also intangible laws of polarity. That's why there's light and there's dark, there's good and there's evil. That's why there's this concept of construction and a concept of destruction. Where's your heart? Are you focusing on constructing and building people up, or are you focused on destructing and tearing people down? And only will construct the people that gather together to destruct everything else. Where's your heart? You get what you focus on. So what happens is when you break one of the spirit laws, because they all mesh together, they don't contradict each other. There are no isolated doctrines of scripture. So when you break one of the spiritual laws, and this is the reason why the world is wrong, what's going to happen is a curse is going to go in the opposite direction. As you go forward in the direction you're going, it's going in the opposite direction around the world. And eventually, you're going to run and collide right into it. And those curses are going to backlash on you. That's why it says, whatever you sow, that you will reap. What goes around comes around. I think we call it karma. All these, they're spiritual laws, they're automation, and we don't need to believe them in order for them to happen. We don't need to believe that a tree is going to grow in order for the tree to grow. The tree doesn't need us to believe it's going to grow for it to grow. That's why it says that he that keepeth God's laws, he will be as a tree planted by the river. His leaves shall not falter, and whatever he does, it shall prosper. These are spirit laws, and nobody can change these. This is the creator, the real God. Now, anyone claiming to pretend to be something, that's just a counterfeit. That is taking advantage of people's ignorance. And see, when you help to spread this and to help keep people ignorant, you're operating under the forces of the dark kingdom. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention. I learned this from a teacher named Brother Wayne Malcolm. And he teaches us this. You know, when it talks about in Ephesians chapter 6, when it says, servants obey your masters, and masters do well to your servants. Now, that's not talking about slaves and owners. That's talking about employee and employer relationships. And then it goes right from that right into spiritual warfare, where it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Now that means you have no enemies with flesh and blood on them. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We wrestle against spirits. You know, and it tells you 4 categories of demonic spirit. It says principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in high places. This is 4 categories of demonic spirit. Principalities represents governmental demons. Powers represent economic demons. Rulers of darkness represents humanitarian demons. Demons who work in the humanitarian area, whose job is to keep people ignorant. And the vehicles of ignorance are education, media, television. And then you have the divine in it, wickedness, spiritual wickedness in high places. So you break that down, and do you wonder, is it any wonder that the Lord's Gospels, the Lord comes in 4 Gospels, along with 4 categories of demonic spirit. Jesus comes in 4 Gospels, you know. The Gospel of Matthew is his account as a king. That's the principality. The Gospel of Mark is his account as a servant. That's the powers department, servant. The Gospel of Luke is his account as a humanitarian, as the Son of Man. That's the humanitarian department. And the Gospel of John is his account as the Son of God. That's the divinity department. So this is why in the Gospel of Matthew and in the Gospel of Luke, there are genealogies. The Gospel of Matthew goes back to the king's line, goes back to Abraham. No, that's the Gospel of Matthew, goes back to Abraham. And the Gospel of Luke goes all the way back to the Son of Man, all the way back to Adam. Then you have the Gospel of John, it goes all the way back to the divinity as the Son of God. But there is no genealogy in the Gospel of Mark. Why? Because it doesn't matter where a servant comes from. You see, God's word is perfect in every way. And when you start understanding what he really said in the original language, it just makes perfect sense. And this gospel is not meant to be hidden. It's meant to be shared among the people so that the people will not be ignorant of the devil's devices. Okay, so my name is JT.